Well, to begin with, a bit of an introduction. I'm Frank Cordaro. I'm from the Des Moines Catholic Worker. I'm on the substitute list, and I'm grateful to be here. Next year is our 40th anniversary. We're a radical lay movement in the Catholic Church. We do the works of mercy. This is our newsletter. We're looking for new readership. It's not very expensive to get on the list. You give me your name, and I put it on the list. We put it out 4 times a year. We're trying to expand our readership and our support system. We not only do the works of mercy, we're also very militant in our nonviolence. And you might read the front page story. We don't just give the state a problem. We're after our bishop to ordain women. How about that? So get a friendly place here. Look at our community. Thank you. We don't get any applause for that. That's all right. In all fairness, I picked this title and these readings before this weekend's bombings in Paris. But this is no time to shrink away from this issue. And in fact, it is the time to raise it. And you know, I haven't felt this way since 2011 or 2001, 9/11, when pacifists like myself felt very little space to talk. And right now that space is being taken away again. I feel it. Not as bad, because Americans aren't dumb all the time. But we're learning, slowly, hopefully. So it's good to be here in Centerville with a message that I think the world needs to see. And I've got 25 people who are captive, and you paid me. So I want you to listen with an open heart. Don't have to agree, but really this is who I am and this is where I come from. Some people are calling this experience in Paris, I heard it coming down on public radio, so, it's that progressive crowd, that this could be a second 9/11 moment. And all I can say is, God help us all. God help us all. If you ask Americans today, if you ask Americans who go to church today, who is the greatest threat to world peace? And they will tell you ISIS is. And that certainly is the American perspective. And it certainly makes today's gospel a hard sell. But I love this gospel, and I want to spend some time unpackaging it, because what is it really telling us, and who is telling it, and where's it coming from? Well, it's coming from the Gospel of Matthew, so we know it's the Holy Gospel of the Lord. And the scholars tell us that Matthew was written primarily for a Jewish community. I buy that. And that the Sermon on the Mount is the first big teaching moment, and there are like 5 of those moments in Matthew to coalesce with the 5 books of the Torah. There are lots of ways in which Matthew tells people who study him that he's Jewish. So the Sermon on the Mount is sort of like the inaugural address of the Jesus policies, since we're in a campaign year. And these are the policies of Jesus. And the opening 8 verses are the dynamite ones, sort of like the preamble of the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. I mean, I don't know the whole Declaration of Independence, but we do know the first words. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Back then they just thought men, but we broadened that. That's what we did. But we all know that. So this is sort of like the Declaration of Independence statement in Matthew for the Jesus people, and it begins with the Beatitudes, right? Blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who are hungry, blessed are those who are persecuted. Basically the weak and the losers are the ones Jesus says are the ones who are blessed. And today, we go right to readings that go to the heart of the world we live in. It's all about violence and war and killing, the way the world lives. And Jesus is saying, we got a different platform. Just like the Beatitudes. So in the area of, teaching about retaliation, he gives these examples. He says, you have heard that it says, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, which is sort of like, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth is considered a liberal position back then. Because, someone takes someone's eye out, then the neighbor comes in, I'm not only going to take your eye out, I'm going to take your 3 sisters out too. You see, there was some kind of proportionality and justice. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth. The world likes that. Most of the people who are in the status quo like that. But Jesus says, we're different. And then he says to him, offer no resistance to the one who is evil. Basically, he's saying, don't respond with a negative when you're being treated negatively. Basically saying, when you are in a place where you are justifiably cheated, robbed, whatever, he's saying, don't retaliate the way they retaliate. Don't use evil for no good reason. Do you hear what I mean? Don't use evil for any good reason. No good reason. Catch on words. All right. Then he says, when someone strikes you on your right cheek, turn the other one to him as well. This is important. This is important to know the difference between a right cheek and a left cheek. The first century and who we're talking about. So Jesus is telling his Christians followers in Matthew, when someone strikes you on the right cheek, all right, now we have to picture us, 2 bodies. I'm the Christian, servant. The person who hits me on the right cheek, master, pagan. The only way a master can hit a servant when they don't like him is with the back of their hand. So if the master hits you on your right cheek, you as a servant, right cheek, you get hit by the back of the hand. Jesus is saying, get up and offer him your other cheek, which would mean, I'm an equal. Hit me with your full fist. Now, how do we know this? Because the only hand anybody would strike anybody with is the right hand. Because in the Middle East in the first century, see this hand here? It was dead to public. Couldn't use it. Want to venture to guess why? It has to do with toiletries and human hygiene. This is the hand they use to wipe themselves. Universal. This is the only hand you offer, even when you're going to strike somebody. If you're a master, you strike with this hand, the right hand. You strike the right hand with a servant, the back of your hand. And if you have to use your open hand, you use a fist. This is breaking it down in a first century bottom-up perspective. All the other ones fall in place. If anyone wants to go to law with you over your tunic, hand me your cloak as well. Tunics? Hey, if you got to go to law with your tunic, all you own is your tunic. You see, that's kind of like a creditor scene. They're going after the poorest of the poor. If you're the poorest of the poor, and the only thing you have is your outdoor coat, it's sort of like there was a rule in Israel at the time, and other places, in those nomadic places. It's sort of like back in the farm things, when they were doing liquidation and bankruptcy, you at least give them their house and their 40 acres. You remember that sort of thing? Well, this is a bone down, give them your house and 40 acres. You don't take away a person's night coat, that he might sleep on it and not freeze to death. And this is kind of like a rule. As bad as anybody has treated you, you can't take his clothes away, okay? It's a limit. It's another limit. And Jesus says, if someone has the gall to do that to you, don't only take a coat, take your undergarment off, give it to him in the courtroom. Shame him. You see what I'm saying? Next, just follow me. This is good stuff for me. I find it very interesting. I hope you find it, at least listen to. Should anyone press you to service for 1 mile, you go within the next mile. This was easily understood by anyone who was conquered by the Romans in the first century. Roman army moved fast, and they commandeered locals to carry their stuff. And the emperor said, look, these are our friends we're traveling through, so we shouldn't leave them with a bad taste. You can only take a civilian 1 mile away from wherever he lives to carry your stuff, and then find another civilian. That's how the Romans think. Jesus said, if one of your oppressors do that to you, carry it 2 miles, bring shame to him. It's kind of a radical way in which people in the lower class can have equality. Then this is the one that just breaks. There's so many of these in the gospel. It's all about banking and interest. The first compromise, after the Constantinian compromise, was the compromise all was made on interest. Jesus says, give to the one who asks you, and do not turn your back on the one who wants to borrow. There are no bankers who can live like that here. And my first place to serve was Logan, Iowa. We had the head banker there, and I'd say to him, I don't know how to give it to you because your business couldn't run on this ethic. That's a bit of an overstatement, maybe not. And then it goes on to say, you heard about this thing about love your neighbors, hate your enemies? That's wrong too. You gotta love your enemies. Look, when I was in high school, I was a true believer. I was a baby boomer. I was a believer in the Vietnam War. I believed the whole thing. I went to college, and I'm a Catholic, and I read the New Testament for the first time. Back then, that was strange. Catholics didn't read the scriptures. Some of you older folks remember that. We only had the priest to interpret to us. And I was just blown away by the radical Jesus I met in college. The one I just picked up the book. I read the stories, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and I said to myself, my God, this guy's really given it to the system, wants us to be serious about pacifism and love, and take it to the cross and take it to the poor. That's how I read it. And that's completely opposite, the way I read it, than most Christian churches are doing it. That was in 1976. And I said to myself, through this whole journey in my life, I'm going to follow Jesus no matter what. And it's taken me to the priesthood and out of the priesthood in the Catholic Church. It's got me in trouble with both church and state. I've done close to 6 years of jail time for protesting. Fast wine. 1998. That's almost 25 years ago, folks. Before 9/11. As part of a plowshares action. Beat your swords into plowshares, the first reading from Isaiah. This is action from a lot of the Catholic left people, the people that the church tries to ignore in this country, and we're all part of the Methodist crazy people, the Presbyterian crazy people. I live with Reverend Bob Cook. We're part of the growing kind of radical Christian fringe crowd, taking Jesus seriously, and beating a B-52 bomber in 1998 was my christening into the plowshares movement on a tarmac at Andrews Air Force Base at an air show, where this country was having an air show and showing off our weapons of mass destruction. And we put a couple hammer blows on the side of the B-52 bomber in front of thousands, and were arrested quickly, and I did 6 months for that. And back then, in 1998, I knew that what Martin Luther King said in 1968, that the United States is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. And it hadn't dissipated in 68. It just has gotten ramped up in 98. And now we're here. And this message of love your enemy is just as much a hard sell as it ever has been. And the problem with preaching love your enemy in the United States of America this Sunday morning is because most people who go to our churches and the preachers who are preaching will tell people that the biggest threat to world peace is ISIS. 5% of the world, U.S., believes ISIS is the biggest threat of the world peace. And the vast majority of the rest of the human race believes the USA is the biggest threat to world peace. And they don't like ISIS either. Our problem is we cannot imagine that we are the center of the problem. No sin is unforgivable except the sin of denial. Because if you don't own up to what you're doing, you're going to keep making the same mistake. And if this is 9/11 too, God help us all. And I hope this time through, Christians will find their voice in this country and realize God is not pro-war, pro-rich, or necessarily pro-USA. Randy and Brady. Sorry. God help us.
We have the wrong number there for this hymn. It's 368. 368. I've got